The banks earn billions of dollars in interest income every single quarter. They make a ton of money. We know that they're successful at doing it. As much as we hate the banks, we could take the same principles that the bank has for themselves and apply it in our own personal economy. But it's just a matter of shifting that thinking instead of, for lack of better words, if we just stop being juvenile about the way we're thinking about money when no one's watching ourselves. If we applied that same level of treating, like the bank treats it like a business, why don't we treat how we deal with our own money like a business?
Welcome to the WinEh podcast. This show is focused on empowering ranchers. Whether you're a seasoned rancher or just getting started, we'll guide you on how to use the infinite banking concept as an alternative way to finance your operations. It's a better way to think about money. Join us as we discuss planning for the future, attracting the next generation, and the art of keeping more money within the family. Here's your hosts, WinEh and Lacy.
Hey, I'm so glad you're choosing to lean into this next conversation, as it's another really informal way to get you to start shifting your thinking a little bit. So what is it that we're going to be chatting about next there, Miss Lacy?
Okay, so this is a very exciting time. It's the first week of October, and when we're recording this, and we just got in the mail this week our first printed proof of the Canadian edition of Farming Without the Bank. And so we want to share a little snippet of it with you today. And so I'm just going to read right out of the book, and then we're going to have conversation. So this is chapter 3.
Storytime.
It's Storytime. That's right.
Okay.
Chapter 3, use and storage of money. So 2 factors you're not conditioned to think about are 1, honest use, and 2, the correct storage of money. So honesty and self-respect. By honest use, I mean stop stealing from yourself. I'm willing to say you would never steal from someone else because you know it's illegal and wrong. I'm also willing to say you are stealing from yourself every day and you don't realize it. If you are like the majority of people, you've been taught how to use money incorrectly. When you buy something with credit cards or borrowed money, you simply pay that money back plus interest. In fact, you may not even ask what the interest rate is on the borrowed money. You need the money and can afford the payment, so there's no need to question or concern yourself with anything more. What you may not realize, as R. Nelson Nash points out in his book, is that 34.5% of every dollar spent goes to debt service, interest and fees. This number is all relative to the size of your operation. It doesn't matter if you're a beginning farmer or rancher or one who has a $3 million annual operation. You've lost interest to the bank. On the other hand, when you use cash to purchase something, you don't even consider paying yourself back plus interest. Heck, you may not even consider paying yourself back because you don't think of it as a loan. If you are a saver, you'll continue to save by refilling your savings account, but you will most likely not pay yourself interest. Why wouldn't you give your money the same respect you give the credit card companies or banks money? Do you think more of them than yourself? And are you going to use your own saved money, put the borrowed money back plus interest? Treat every transaction as if you put it on the credit card or borrowed it from the bank. Imagine yourself as the banker charging interest for the use of that money. If you are willing to give someone else interest for the use of their money, but not pay interest to yourself, you are, in essence, stealing from yourself. To further my point, let's look at an example. You want a side-by-side and you want to pay cash for it, so you save $5,000. In order to have this money in savings, you put it there through monthly savings contribution. Once the $5,000 is there, you buy your side-by-side and your account is now at 0. You decide not to continue saving because you met your end result. If you are thinking like a banker, you will be diligent and continue making those monthly contributions into your savings account to replace the $5,000 you took. If you think as much of yourself as you do the banker, you will charge yourself interest and replace the $5,000 plus interest. When you pay yourself back, the $5,000 plus interest to your account grows by the interest amount. You've now created wealth with money you have just used to buy something else.
So as I was listening to you, Lacy, and listening to all of those words, I really love how Mary Jo touches on it, especially as it's so relatable to, the agricultural community, right? But regardless of any community, what I felt was like just the normal thing that sort of comes up. It sort of reminds me of like the very first few times when, your parents aren't home to put you to bed. They kind of trust you. It's like, yeah, we're going to be out for the night. We're going to be home late. It's like, I think very few of us would actually go to bed when we should and go through the same amount of discipline, right? Or it's like, because we hate interest so much. So many times I've heard, if I don't have to pay myself that interest, like, why should I? It's like applying the same level of discipline. The banks earn billions of dollars in interest income every single quarter. They make a ton of money. We know that they're successful at doing it. As much as we hate the banks, we could take the same principles that the bank has for themselves and apply it in our own personal economy, right? But it's just a matter of shifting that thinking instead of, for lack of better words, if we just stop being juvenile about the way we're thinking about money when no one's watching ourselves. If we applied that same level of like treating, like the bank treats it like a business, why don't we treat how we deal with our own money like a business?
Absolutely.
Right? Instead of coming into this defiant, like getting defiant about it. And I think another reason why we might not be as disciplined is because the stick is not there, right? We know if we don't make that interest payment or the full payment to the bank, what happens? Well, our credit score goes down.
Yeah.
That's a whole other thing. It's good if we know what the game is. Obviously, the game of lending money at the bank is that the bank will lend you money if you got give you better lending products and give you a better interest rate if you got a better credit score. And because of that, it's like for those of us who like getting better grades at school, right? We want to work towards that higher credit score because we want to feel like we're somehow responsible, right? So we'll do all these things to prop ourselves up so that we can get lending from somewhere else. But what about the fact that we don't actually have to play that game anymore? But if we apply the same discipline without needing like all the punishment in place, we can get similar results, but in our own personal life.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, again, it comes back around how we've been conditioned to behave with money and treat money. And then it also makes me think about like when the cat's away, the mouse play. It's so what kind of person are you? When your boss is away, do you still continue to put forth the effort that you would as if they were standing over you? And are you willing to do that with your own money? Because the bank's not knocking on your door or giving you a call when you miss that payment. Are you treating yourself the same way? And so it all goes back, to how we've been conditioned to think. And then are we willing to make a change, go through that? It's never easy. Usually it's never easy to make changes that stick, but anything worth having is worth fighting for, no matter how hard it is. And so open mind, but learning a different way.
So just to describe the stick even further, right? I think that the most painful part of having that stick that the bankers have, typically the lenders, is not just the lower credit score, but we've all talked about it or have experienced it or have listened to someone else saying, oh man, like the bank's calling me again, or the creditor's after me, or having to go through, what is probably one of the, like for most people, one of the worst times of their life, having to claim or consider having to claim bankruptcy, consider having a consumer proposal done because things just got so out of control. That's the kind of stick the lenders have because you can lose so much, right?
Right.
Whereas the stick that, that we could also describe by not becoming your own banker is by having to have limited choices, by having to deal with the banks for the rest of your life, by having to live under, the pain of potentially being in bankruptcy or consumer proposal because you didn't give yourself the circumstance to ride out rough situations, right? So talking about rough situations, what is the current situation that constantly goes around? It maybe changes from, 5 years to 10 years to maybe 15 years. But we all, in the agricultural community, what are the different things that need to be written out all the time, financially speaking? The weather,
and ever changing. And I think that's why you see so many farmers and ranchers, people, like they're obsessed with the weather, or they're always checking the weather. Well, like, because they are preparing to ride out whatever is coming next, right? The weather, the planning of it. When are the cows going to be sold? When are they going to be weaned? When are we going to harvest? Can we finish harvest before the rain comes that's forecasted? Can we get it done at the optimal time for the crop so that we have the best quality crop going to the elevator? There's always something that needs to be smoothed over or forecasted, ridden out, right? And if we can prepare ourselves to have the freedom of options when those things come up, is like so good for your mental health, even as a business owner, right?
Mm-hmm. And so, because as you were going through all those different circumstances, like I was thinking about like, what about the bugs? What about the rising cost of feed? What about the rising cost of fertilizers, or, like all the different uncontrollable factors that you guys all face. And like I said, I truly do really appreciate all the different risks that you guys have to take in order to help put food on our tables here in the city. If I didn't have these daily conversations with you guys, I really wouldn't have that perspective, right? Because it's just easy I love and support going to the farmers markets as much as I can. But being able to go to a store and just like pick stuff up, whenever, I'd like, right? But just like the effort and the energy that goes behind all of that. Now, when you were reading, what were you reading? You were reading the 3rd chapter from the Canadian version of Farm Without the Bank. And when Nelson and Mary Jo referred to the 34.5%, maybe some of you kind of wonder, okay, well, where did you get that number? But when you really start breaking out, especially if you're in the agricultural community, 34.5% is a huge number. And how it turns out to be so big in the scheme of things is that if you haven't really sat down to really do the math of how much interest you pay over a course of your lifetime relative to how much money you actually bring in, it's about that. It's like a third of our money goes to taxes, a third of it goes to interest. And then the rest of it is what we attempt, what you guys and what I do, attempt to live on and attempt to save. So why is investing such a huge thing? It's because we got so many snakes and dragons, that want our money. Snakes and dragons being the banker and the government. They want our money, right? And they didn't even do any of the work or take on any of the risk. And so this is where people can really get really super confused financially about what is the best thing to do with our money, and is investing the right thing to do if you don't really truly understand how money works, right? I think that there's a foundational bridge that really needs to happen before people really go investing their money outside of their own business, right? Because at least with your own business, you know what the factors are.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And I think this all, it just comes back around to where to start is inform yourself with our video series and or reading Nelson's book or the Canadian version. And by the time you get through one of the books or the video series, whichever you choose to be your path of education, you will know whether this resonates with you and whether you want to know more about it. And that's a first step, because you don't know until you know. It's one of those things that, okay, it's on your checklist. So read the book, watch the video series, then you know whether it resonates with you and you can check that off and move to the next step, whatever that may be. And so, I could read the whole book on here but I think that would be too long of an episode.
Yeah. And before we really just like sign off on this one here, it's like the reason why, like to really add to why we might be stealing from ourselves is really just not knowing that there is another way where you can, which is something that we're going to cover off in a different session about where to store your money, because quite often we just think when we store it at the bank, it's good. But actually by storing it at the bank, we're subject to different terms and conditions of storing our money at the bank. And, unless you store your money at a certain level, then maybe you don't get any banking fees. But certainly for the most part, for the majority of the people, it's like, no, you're going to get charged every single month just for having your money at the bank. Meanwhile, as some of you may or may not know, the banks use our money to make more money. And is there a better place to store your money where you can have it constantly, where your money is constantly compounding, whether you use it or not?
Right. Yep. So questions, feedback, comments, WeCare@rancherway.com. Grab the book bundle on our website. Bye, guys.
So glad you leaned in with us on the WinEh podcast. We truly hope you're feeling more informed and empowered to take another step towards optimizing your financial life. Right now, make sure you hit subscribe so you can keep growing and learning with us. Until next time, we wish you prosperity in every area of your life.